Just a trick, just to make sure you're all listening. Right, hello, I'm Iain Parks, and this is my talk, Padlocks and Plausible Pretences. So what we're going to be talking about in this is basically, I'm going to be taking you through a physical security penetration test and what things I look for. It might not be the same for everybody, but this is the things I look for, and some of the stories of how I've used the things that I've discovered, and yeah, information on there. So basically this talk is just a really focus on how information is key, and how if you're not too sure about physical penetration testing, you can't just really walk up there and get in. You're gonna probably fail. So this is really going to talk about how you can use the information that you can find and use it to get into some really cool places. I've been in a server room in a bank, so we'll talk about that. So, big disclaimer, obviously this is all illegal. If you get arrested, it's not my fault. I'm going to be talking about things, I have quite a lot of experience with access control and CCTV systems and fire alarm systems. Obviously messing around with fire alarm systems is a really bad idea if you don't know what you're doing, because you could kill people, and kill people sue very badly. But yeah, all the stuff I'm going to be talking about here, there's nothing secretive or stuff you can't find out, but it's all information that you can use to basically break into places. It's nothing new, nothing unknown. We'll talk about information you can find through public knowledge and through public websites. And finally, yeah, physical penetration testing is fun but stressful. Just remember that. Very stressful. So I currently am a senior security consultant at Rootshell Security. My main background was 18 years of experience with fire alarm, access control, CCTV, intruder alarm systems, as well as building integration. So I have a lot of background of like building, how buildings work and how they function. I've performed physical penetration tests in the UK and Europe. And a fun fact, when I was young, I connected a 1.5 volt filament bulb to the main supply. It was very bright for a very short period of time, which shows, you don't have to be the brightest to do this sort of job. So, breaking into buildings, it's illegal, right? So, whenever I drop my kids off at school, somebody says, "Oh, so what do you do for a living?" And I tell them that I break into buildings. You get two types of responses. You get the response of people walking away very quickly. You get the response of people really interested in why and how and who wants this. So, who wants this? So, what sort of companies would want a physical penetration test? So, your obvious ones are your high-risk organizations where they're at risk from like nation states and APTs. So, your financial institutions might find this a big risk, where they're using a lot of sensitive data, information about people they don't want to get out. Disgruntled staff. Maybe you've got an abattoir, people, some vegans out there may not like it. No offense to people who are vegan, but, people who have protesters and rivals and companies. Maybe you've got intellectual knowledge. You've also got things that are critical infrastructure, like food and medicine is a popular one, and maybe, energy, things like that. So all these companies, physical penetration testing is kind of very key to, but it doesn't generally need to be those, and it all depends on the engagement itself. So obviously when we do a physical engagement, there'll normally be what risk is to the company. So different companies have different risks. So for example, a plant where they make items like medicine or something, their risk may be that someone gets into the industrial control system and affects the medicines, how it's created. Where a bank, it may be that somebody gets into the server room, accesses the server or the banking system itself, and affects that. So this could also be part of like a red team. So, when you've got a red team engagement, you may have a company say, do what you want with us. Here's our information. We might use it as part of a red team to get information or to get access to the infrastructure itself. So it could be part of that as well. So what do we gain? So doing all this, it sounds fun, it sounds exciting. Oh, look, we've got into your server room, but what what information can we gain from that? So for a client's perspective, we look at the external presence of the company. So it will help the company realize what's out there and what can be found out quite easily. It'll also help understand what the weaknesses are, and to improve their security. So maybe they didn't realize that that gate was not very good around the corner, or their security staff aren't on the ball as they should be. You can also assess the response and processes in place. You know, do the security do the right thing? You can't really do that if you're planning it. However, on a physical engagement, you know, a requirement might be that we want you to get caught. We want you to see how security can track you down and find you. And then overall, you know, it might assess the training and what staff need to do. You know, are staff aware of the risks of doing X, Y, and Z? So we can assess that as well. So the stages of a physical penetration test, it's not as short as turning up and going in, as I mentioned before. It's got the same stages of what you would probably find in a, you know, infrastructure test. So we've got the OSINT phase. So this is where we look for information about the company, the buildings, the area, the environment of the target. We've then got hostile reconnaissance. This is where we actually physically go to site and investigate what we can see, what information we can get from that. We've then got the planning and pretexting. This is kind of the largest part of the exercise. This is where we actually plan what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what are the risks involved of doing X, doing Z. Is there a better way of doing it? Do we need more than one person, more attempts, certain times? So this is the important part. The execution, where we actually perform it, the intrusion, and then the objectives within that execution. So what are our objectives once we get on site? There's no point of saying we get on site and that's it. We need to have an objective, because once we've done those objectives, we want to get out of there. We don't want to get caught. We want to have a successful engagement where we've got into the building, we've completed the objectives, and we've got out. And then finally, it's the reporting and training. So, you know, we need to be able to report what vulnerabilities exist, what training is required, and how they can improve their security. So first of all, we're going to go for open source intelligence, and everyone's favorite, Google, the hackers directory. So whenever I do a physical engagement, I'll have an address. I'll go to Google Maps. So I'll go on Street View, and as you can see, I can easily look at a building. I can normally go all the way around a building. So this, you know, this takes a lot of the hostile reconnaissance concerns away of being weird standing by a building for a couple of hours. It can get the information instantly, and I can find information out straight away about what the building's like. One thing that's really good on Google Maps is it's normally got a photo section, and it's normally got photos from the actual people who own the building or the company. And also it might have photos from just random people who have been in the building. So an example is there was a factory, and it had lots of pictures from the customer on the outside, you know, really fancy, look at our products. But HGV drivers were posting pictures of inside the warehouse, which helped me to determine what sort of high-vis they wear, what sort of uniform they're wearing, what their badges look like. And all this information was readily available on Google Maps. We also do obviously Google searches, and we look for any files. So, you know, I'll download, you know, their monthly financial statements, and I'll have a look at the metadata on those files. Can I see, what sort of computer you're using, you know, what software was used to create it, what the username were, who created that file. And I can get information from the company that way, which might be used within the engagement itself. Another one of my favorite websites is the Planning Office. On the Planning Office, we can easily see what works are being carried out on site or nearby. The great thing of this is you've normally got some plans, so you can normally see what the layout of the building is, which is great. So for example, if I'm trying to get access to a server room, then I'll go to the Planning Office, I'll type in the postcode of the site, and boom, I've got some nice plans. And oh, they're having an extension, or they're installing some more security cameras. I can see where them security cameras are now. In fact, it was one engagement where they were installing security cameras. I knew exactly where they were looking, what range they had, because it was all on the drawings. So from this information, you can actually get quite a lot of details. You know, I've got the names of the contractors that are installing it. I've got the name of the architect that's probably designed part of the building. I can see what sort of layouts, when it's going to happen. And yet again, all this information I keep and I use as part of I might use as part of my pretext when going onto site. It also helps to work out where I'm going, what I need to do. So for example, I'll look for like safe spaces. For example, a toilet is a safe space. Nobody comes and follows you in the toilet generally. And it's a good place to kind of hide and plan your next part of an attack. So these are great websites. The next website I go to is social media. So LinkedIn or Hacked In. I go there to see, you know, company photos that they've put on there of charity events where they're giving big checks to people, and they're all there in their lanyards, which shows their company, their name, who they are, and general layout. It doesn't even have to be high quality, because I know what their logo looks like, and I know that blur is their logo, and I know that little face-shaped thing is their face. So I can use all this for information to be able to create my own lanyards. I can also see company celebrations. Oh, I just celebrated something, or they might have some blog posts on there about something they've just done or they're going to do. Yet again, more information I can use as part of the pretext. I can see what employees are on there. So on LinkedIn, people put their employees on there. I might, try and find someone who I want to avoid. Facilities manager, for example. They're going to know who's on site if I'm going as a third-party contractor. Maybe someone I need to avoid, or someone to name drop in that situation. The company website itself. Great. Careers page. I can see what jobs they've got offering. I might even be able to find out what technology they use. So, for example, they might be advertising for a developer that can work with PHP. I know they use PHP there. Or images of inside, or work images. Say, this company, we offer this, this, and this, and we can get that information on there. Yeah, again, downloads. Again, I can get metadata from those files that we've downloaded. So my objective for all of this is to try and get as much information as I can about staff, the uniforms, who they work with, the building layouts, the security details, any lanyards and ID cards that they use, all this information that I'm going to use, because at this point I still don't know whether I'm going to pretend to be someone who works there or someone who doesn't work there. So the more information I get, the more it helps me to find the processes. So access control lanyards, as I mentioned, people wearing access control lanyards is great. So you might have seen like a photo like this on a company website, very, very common, of them wearing the lanyards. I'll zoom in and I'll say, okay, right, then the visitors wear a visitor lanyard. Amazon, visitor lanyard, done. They wear blue lanyards. Amazon, blue lanyard. It's very easy to do. And if you want a custom lanyard, they've got like their custom branding on it. Do you know what? You go to a website, there's a checkbox that says, I am authorized to use this logo. And that is the security on most of these websites to create custom lanyards. So although they're wearing custom lanyards, they might have their company on there. You can easily order a lanyard that looks very similar. It might not be exact, but it'd be enough to be visually perfect. Be able to copy their lanyard as well, which I have done in the past, and it's worked very well. So you can do all this online. It's very great. So another thing I do, I go into hostile reconnaissance, and the first thing I do is give them a call. Sounds weird. Hello, can I come and look at your building today? No, not that type of call. So one of the things when I give them a call is, because I have experience of access control and CCTV, I know sort of things that are weaknesses in those areas. And if you've seen my talk I did in London in December, you'll know one of the things I asked for. So one of the things I always ask for is I pretend to be a fire officer. Sounds a bit weird, but what I do is I pretend to be a fire officer and ask them when their fire alarm test is. You all know, you've all got a building, you've probably been in an office, and every Wednesday at 10 o'clock the fire alarm goes off. There's a good point. There's a good reason why I asked that question. First of all, I know they're going to have one. Yeah, there's going to be an answer. And I know that everybody knows the time and day because they're all used to it. They don't need to go and ask anyone else for that information. So the reception staff will probably be able to answer that question. And they'll think, well, there's nothing to worry about there. So they'll just tell me, it's 10 o'clock on a Wednesday. I'll then ask them who their responsible person is. So with fire alarm systems, you have to have someone that's called a responsible person. They're responsible for making sure that the fire alarm system works. So they get their head cut off if it doesn't. So they'll probably give me that name, and then I'll probably go over a bit deeper information, which they normally don't know, or they may not know, is who looks after their fire alarm system. And I'll get the company name. So yet again, I might get more information there, so I can easily use that as part of a pretext. Another reason why it's good to know about the fire alarm is because it's usually a time where it's slightly more quiet, because they don't normally have extra people to come and do these fire alarm tests. It's normally the security guard that are doing these tests. So that means that I know that security, or generally the building itself, is going to be a bit disorganized at that point. So when they're doing the fire alarm test, it's going to be noisy. People aren't going to be kind of talking as much, and there's going to be a lot of movement around. So I know it's a good distraction technique for me to try and get into the building. So hostile reconnaissance. Yes, that is my bag, and I have used hostile reconnaissance with that bag and those aerials. So First of all, I'll probably go and drive by the building. Just generally drive past it, just have a look at the building itself, look at obvious areas. What are people doing around there? Will it look a bit weird if I'm walking around? I'll also want to make sure that I kind of blend in. Why am I walking around a building? Or if it's in a random remote area, then I might not do as much hostile reconnaissance than if it's in the middle of a city centre. If it's in a city centre, I can just pretty much wear whatever. If it's in an industrial estate, I'll wear something that looks like I'm comfortable in an industrial estate. You know, I could be a worker nearby factory or wearing a high vis, or I could be in a suit if I'm around like a office park. So I'll get that all information more than likely within the OSINT, and then the hostile reconnaissance, I'll use that as almost like a pretext for the hostile reconnaissance. I'll get as many photos and pictures as I can of things like entrances and exits and fire exits and around the building. I normally do this with the old phone technique, you know. I'm taking pictures at this point. You know, I'm not on the phone, I'm taking pictures. I'll also make a note of any smoking areas, because it's usually where people congregate, and I can normally use that as a possibly a tailgating area. I'll make note of people movement, attitude. Are people holding the doors open for people? Are people generally very nice to people? Are they talkative? Does everyone kind of know each other, or, you know, are they walking in with headphones on? Are they young or they're old? You know, younger people generally have a less awareness of security than older people, because older people are kind of more au fait with, you know, con men. Yet younger people are kind of in the generation where they're not aware of it as much, that the physical attackers could be around. I'll also have a look at contractors on site. I've had some engagements where I've seen contractors on site and I've used that as part of a pretext. So, for example, let's say I've seen a contractor working on some doors in the building and I've noted the company name, I noticed the date and time they were there. I can then go back the next week and say, oh, I'm so-and-so from that company, John's Contracting. I've just come to check on the work that they did last week. And because I have this information, extra information makes the pretext way more believable. I'll also do with my bag there, I'll do some Wi-Fi capture, either passive or active, depending on what the requirement is. So passive, I'll just basically walk around with that in my bag, and it'll basically capture any sort of Wi-Fi connections, basically any captures, any handshakes, and then them handshakes I can take back with me if they're crackable, and then I'll basically try and crack those to get access onto their Wi-Fi network. Or active, where I'll actively try and authenticate some clients and try and access that capture yet again, to try and take it to see if they have a strong or a weak key used. I'll also discover any access control system use, so I'll have a look at what they've got. I might do a capture of their reader. So on certain systems, you get certain keys. So access control cards use keys on the reader and on the card, and then they basically use it to encrypt it. So sometimes I'll use everyone's favorite toy, a Flipper Zero, and do some reading on the access control readers itself to get some information. I can then use that to clone badges later on. So from this, I'm basically using this to confirm any items I've found on the OSINT, have a look how generally people act and dress, kind of get pictures of areas, anything, assess the security itself. You know, is it a high security presence in the front door, but not many security at the back door, or no security on the back door? You know, if people are going to the smoking area, which door are they using? Are they going for the front door? Are they going for a side door? I'm looking at all these small details which can be leveraged later on. Yeah, again, experience of fire alarm systems, I'll look for things like this. So if I can get access to a reception, I'll have a look to see if I can fire a fire alarm zone chart. Fire alarm zone charts are normally by every fire alarm itself. And here's one, for example, from my local retail unit. And this basically shows me the building layout, shows me where all the entrances could be. It might give me a name of a company, as well as the main contractor details. It might even tell me where, you know, the safe room is, or the cash office, or the server room. It might all be on that detail there, and I haven't had to go on the planning office to find that information out. Also, the fire alarm panel itself, yet again, I might have a look. I'll have a make model. I can use that as part of a pretext. I can have a look if there's any faults or disablements. Yet again, another engagement I had, I saw a fire alarm system with a lot of faults on there, like dangerously lot of faults. I felt bad for him in a way. But when there's a lot of faults on the fire alarm system, it means it is vulnerable. So they technically could be using, it could be occupying the building illegally because of the issues on the system. So yeah, again, that adds the urgency which can be involved in terms of the pretext and saying, I've come to look at your fire alarm system because of the faults you've got. I can use that information yet again as part of the pretext. Yeah, again, look at the lock status as well. So for example, this panel here, I can see that it says level 2 on it, which means it's unlocked, which means there's menus on there. So I can do certain things like set the fire alarm off if I wanted to without having to do any serious damage. Yet again, I wouldn't ethically, but there's other menus in there that I can use, which I'll talk about later, in order to get access to a building that I can use that being in level 2 to be able to open some doors for me. So planning and pretexting. So I'm thinking about my options now. So this is where I take all that information. I go, right, and what is the best routine? Am I going to go as someone who works there? Am I going to go as a contractor? What tools will I need? So yeah, again, I'm looking at every little detail. So even very minor details. So for example, I'll get workwear, I'll get high vis of the same color or the same design. I'll get my lanyards printed. So for example, get a label printer, I get a, ID card printer and print ID cards that look very similar. And I'll get all the information that I need. What props would I need? So for example, if I'm going in as a electrician, I'll need like screwdrivers and meters and things that an electrician would use. And then kind of what attitude would I have? Are they going to be quite shy? I'm trying to get all this information. One of the important things about pretexting is have a knowledge of that pretext. So for example, I use electrician or fire alarm engineer or access control engineer or security engineer quite a lot because I have experience of it and I knowledge. So if anyone asks me any questions, I can probably give them enough information to make it believable. So don't go in there saying you're a lift engineer and you know nothing about lifts. It's probably not the best way to do it. So if you have a little bit of knowledge, sometimes a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. And in this case, it actually could be dangerous that people could believe you. So make sure you know what to wear, what props to get. So this is why I always do the hostile reconnaissance first, and then I'd probably leave it a week or so to be able to actually do the actual execution itself. And remember minor details. So for example, if I'm going to have a tool bag or a tool belt, having a brand new one out of the packet is going to look a bit suspect because it's brand new, it's clean. I'll go and take it in the garden, give it a couple of walks around the block, make sure it's a bit dirty so it looks like that it's more used. Or I wouldn't be carrying, for example, if I'm going in as a worker, I wouldn't be carrying a briefcase or that type of bag. I'd be carrying like a tool bag to take my things in. So the execution, my famous tools of execution. So I have this big, lots of keys. These keys are like generic keys that can be used for opening, for example, cabinets, server racks, general kind of boxes, and they can be great for using anything. I mean, one of these is used for lifts. If I really wanted to, although I've never done it, well, not as a trying to get access, but if I really wanted to, if there's access control on the lift, I could probably ride on top of the lift. It sounds something dangerous, but it can be done. Although obviously, I don't think legal would like that so much. But it's something that could be possible if it was allowed. And obviously sometimes it's very optimistic. You might have a plan of how you're going to execute it, and obviously you've got multiple routes of how you want to execute. Make sure you've got them multiple routes to get in because you might need to change. So for example, make sure you got your keys, make sure you got everything. You might want to adapt. So for example, on one engagement, I knew walking in as a contractor would ring alarm bells with security because they would know that I'm not meant to be there. So I walked in as someone who looked like they were working in an office. I then went straight to the toilet and changed into a contractor. So I tricked security by making them think I worked there. And then I changed into a contractor to get into the office actually on the level because it was a multi-tenant office. So I used two pretexts there to get in and one pretext then to get past the door, to actually get into the client area. Obviously be observant of others. So see how they act. So for example, if people are holding the door open for each other, hold the door open. You'll be surprised that if you hold the door open for someone, people have this natural urgency to pay back that debt of you holding the door. So if you hold the door open for them, the chances are if they get to the door before you, they'll probably hold it open for you. So use that, abuse the natural human nature that we have. Sounds horrible, but you can abuse that sort of trust that you've made. Like, I've opened the door for you, you'll open the door for me kind of logic. Also have your hands full, I sometimes go in there with the previous slide. I sometimes go with that pole there, which looks almost like a flag to try and find me when they're trying to chase me down. But it's great. People hold doors open for you and they ask questions about it. So they ask injury, what you doing? And, I use that kind of more of a technique to get access to areas. Also as well, for example, you might have an area where everyone is swiping in their access control card to get into a zone, even though the door's open. So be observant, saying, why are they doing that? The chances are it's what they call an anti-passback system, which means you need a card to get in and a card to get out. If they don't swipe in, they basically can't get out. So if everyone's scanning in, you need to pretend to do the same. Your card may not work. It won't work, hopefully. But you can obviously use that technique to pretend you're swiping in, even if the card doesn't work, so you look more believable. So you look like you're meant to be there. One of the other things that I've used as well with the ID cards is these, available on TikTok Shop. So these are a cat printer that prints out sticky labels. Some sites actually have stickers that print out a picture of you and to say you're allowed to be on that site on that day. You can buy a cat printer. You can print it off of your phone before you go in, and it works. So always have an exit method as well. Always have something planned. So, for example, you need to use the toilet. So on one engagement, I got into the building. I sat down. I did some various network penetration tests. I captured some hashes of people logging onto their computer on site for about an hour and a half, and then I decided to up the game a little bit. So I started to ask people if I could use their computers, which surprisingly people said, "Yeah, that's nice. Okay, yeah." So I used their computers. And after that, I went back to my desk and think, right, okay, I'm sorted now. I'll log off. And guess what happened? Windows update. So I was there waiting for Windows updates to finish, to shut my computer down, and a lady come up to me. She said, I've just been informed that you've accessed a couple of computers, but I'm not aware I'm not aware of your presence today. Can you tell me who you are? I used the pretext information that I knew. So I said, I'm working for, I basically used the IT consultant, like the IT manager. Say I'm working on for him to check some network stability issues. She goes, okay, can you come to my office so we can just verify your presence? Now, at this point, you think, I'm caught now. But I didn't. I had everything ready. I had my bag packed. So I basically said, oh, yeah, is that the office just around the corner? Because I remembered where she was sitting. She says, yeah, it's the office just the other side of the office. If you just come there. I said, right, I'm just going to pop to the toilet and then I'll come to see you. That was the mistake. She went to her office. I went out the front door. At this point, obviously, I did call the client to let them know that they're probably going to have a very panicked lady calling them up. And sure enough, they did. And they went into full lockdown because obviously I accessed a couple of their computers. But yeah, again, it's that trust that, have that escape route. Another one I've used before is said, I'm meant to be here. Hold on, let me call my manager. I have no reception on my phone. Let me go outside. I'll just give them a quick call and let you know and come back in and let you know. So I've used that as well. And that's a good way to get out in an emergency. My aim here is to actually not get caught. I will always have like a get out of jail letter, which basically states I'm authorized to do this engagement. But my aim is to not give that away. I don't want to give away. I want to basically get to the point where I've said, okay, I've successfully compromised you, even though I sort of semi got caught. So remember that weekly test I talked about? Well, most fire alarm systems, if you didn't know, are actually connected to the access control systems. The reason for it is obviously the fire alarm goes off and you need to get out of the building. It's a fire. So you'll find that most access control doors are actually free release at that point. So you can just push the door open. You don't need a card. You don't need anything. So because of this, I first of all, A, found out when the fire alarm's going off, and B, I actually know a time and a date, what time the doors are open. That's like brilliant information. So I'll use this information. So most sites do not have an isolation key switch to turn it off. Because the idea is they're testing the fire alarm system. They're testing to make sure the doors release. So this is basically the most weakest part of the security, and it happens on every building every week. So because of that, I know when it's happening. There's also a very loud siren that tells me that it's happening and the doors are unlocked, which also helps. So I don't even need to even watch security. I can just, one engagement I walked in through the front door knowing that the fire alarm test was in about 5 minutes. I just waited in the stairwell because I knew that in the next 3 minutes, the fire alarm's going to go off and I can open the door. So you can use that sounder to make you aware. And yet again, it may only be for a short period, normally, 15 seconds, but you've normally sort of like 30 seconds or so. But on most newer systems, they're what they call addressable systems, and it actually takes about 15 seconds for them to reset after the sounds have stopped. So even when the sounders have stopped, the doors could still be unlocked at that point. And sometimes they might do it one or two 2 or 3 times. So yet again, this can help you get into certain areas. So for example, on that engagement, I waited in the stairwell because it was access control from the stairwell out. When I heard the fire alarm, I opened the door. I then walked into the main lobby and then walked into another area, an open plan office area. I didn't need the card again. I pretended to use a card so people around me could see that I'm using an access control card, even though it didn't work, but I knew the door would be open. So yet again, that adds that sense of security to people watching. And then I got into the area. So yet again, internal doors will be released. What about the server room? I wonder if that door will be released. Yeah, again, it's something to check and be observant of. Also as well, when they're doing a fire alarm test, it might be the actual security staff that are on reception are doing the fire alarm test, which means there's no people at security. So you can first of all, walk in without a problem. Secondly, man traps and stuff, they probably release as well. So all these man traps, I can just walk through. So yeah, again, I can walk straight through those. And then the access control doors, I can get straight in. So you may only have a short period of 30 seconds to get into a building and where you want to get to. But generally, once you're in a building, once you're past that front security, you'll be surprised how many people trust you for the simple fact that you visually look like you're meant to be there, i.e. you're wearing the same colour lanyard, you've got the same ID type badge, you've got the same lanyard, you've got the same access control card. But people won't ask you questions because you got in. So that's how I use a weekly test. So once I'm in, I look for other things as well with access control tricks. So here's a favorite one. You may have seen these on exits to buildings. How many of you have seen them on trying to get into a building? So for example, on one engagement, and this was a bank, had these by the doors next to the access control point like that. Now I know this is physically connected to the lock. So by pressing the button, I know the lock that's unlocked now, and I could just walk in. So sometimes you might see these installed incorrectly. Another thing that you have, sorry, that's going to buzz until I do this next bit, I apologise. I bring these keys with me, which is that magical key down there. I like to call it the magical key. This key basically allows me to open these boxes. So when that's open, that's basically the same as activating it. These are never normally glass, by the way. They're all plastic, so they're all resettable plastic elements. So what I do is I carry one of these around with me, because when I see that, I know that I can use this key to open the door very briefly, very short period of time. So it might have a sounder or buzzer. You may have heard it when somebody left the door open too long on access control. It might beep. Well, normally that's the same siren or buzzer that alerts someone that the door's been opened without the appropriate access control. So I'll just go there with my key. I'll pop it into the bottom of the lock. I'll open it quickly, walk through the door and click it back up. Nobody's known I've activated that. If you want a key, by the way, I've got a couple here. Do not go and open doors. But yeah, I can easily access by that. So on this bank I went to, I did an engagement on, they basically had this on every single access control area. So I could basically walk around the whole entire building by using that little black key with no access controls. In fact, they had it in the entrance to the server room. And guess what? It had like a biometric scanner and you had to scan in and they got you to sign in. But they also had this green call point. So I thought to myself, let's give it a try. So I put the key in and I opened the door and I heard that buzzer. I panicked a little bit because it's an open plan office and it's like a little office over it. I looked around. Nobody turned around. So I shut the door and I did it again just to see what would happen. And yet again, nobody paid a notice. So I walked in. So now I'm in this bank in the server room, which is an interesting place. And quite a lot of banks, they may have a server room, but they'll also have another sub-server room in the server room, normally a caged area where they've got the more secure servers that normally do the transactions themselves, that they have to have an extra level of protection. Now, I noticed one thing. So this is where I'll go into the door controllers part. So access control systems normally have what they call a door controller, which is a box that's on the wall that has the power to it, the main supply, and that connects to the reader and also connects to the magnet and also connects to a fire alarm interface. So it releases on a fire alarm condition. So in this server room, I noticed on the wall inside the non-secure area, the door controller. So if I wanted to, it was at arm reach level as well. I could disconnect the wire from there and open the door. It wasn't in the secure area. And yet again, the fire alarm interface itself. So the door controller may have some security on it. It may set off an alert on the access control system, but the fire alarm interface will not have that because fire alarm systems are so regulated that they don't evolve very quickly. They're very boring and very generic because they have to be. They have to work in extreme conditions. So I know that I could open the fire alarm interface box, disconnect a wire, and the door would release and I could walk in. So obviously that bank had a very big wake-up call when I said, yeah, I accessed 3 of your server rooms, and I just walked off the street in a one-day engagement. They were happy that we found it, but also a little concerned, as you can probably imagine. But yeah, again, don't worry. Access control logs, they look like that. They look horrible. You know, this is just an example of the Paxson system. So you can see that the door was forced and then relocked. You know, nobody looks at those logs. And 9 times out of 10, they're not connected to an intruder alarm system. So in this situation, obviously, the door was opened without the access control. It wasn't recorded on security. Security had no kind of knowledge that it even happened because they're not looking at these access logs. You know, if somebody tries to scan a card in the wrong area or log it, and it'll be just full of information that is not really relevant. And then CCTV rooms, I'm very rare, you know, working in the CCTV industry. They're not very proactive. They're more reactive. So when I mean reactive is they don't look at the CCTV live. They look at it after something's happened. So unless you're in, like, for example, a shopping center, it's more sort of proactive. They're looking at people who are going to break into, you know, not break-ins, but, you know, steal items. So they're looking at people who are known offenders. Quite a lot of office buildings and stuff like that, they don't have that sort of security. Normally the security on the front desk, and he's signing people in, he's talking to people, you know, he's sorting out contractors. He might have the cameras on a screen, but he's not really looking at it. You know, he might be looking on TikTok, looking at cat videos. You know, it's all stuff that he's doing, and they don't have the funds to have someone constantly looking at the CCTV. So I really don't worry about things like CCTV. I don't care if I'm on CCTV because I look how I'm meant to look, and I'm not, you know, I'm even walking around with a big red pole half the time. You know, if you can't find me and I'm carrying a big red pole, then, you know, what's going on? So another engagement is, myself and a colleague entered the building. He went through the front door. He tailgated someone in, and then because he didn't observe someone using their access control card where they had anti-passback, he got almost caught by that because of that reason, and he got took to reception. I went to the kitchen exit where they have the kitchen deliveries, and I told them I was using the fire alarm technique. So I had my big red pole with me. I had my tool bags. And I told them, I'm just coming to do your fire alarm system. Can I just come through here? They let me in. They're a very good company. They've had lots of penetration tests, physicals before. The staff actually went to reception to confirm it after letting me in. And at that point, I'd gone in and I've walked up the stairs, and I'm already on the 3rd floor walking around. So I'm walking around different areas of this building, just generally chatting to people having an interest. Because I'm working on the fire alarm systems, I stand behind people too. So I pretend I'm testing the smoke detector above their head, and I'm looking at what's on their screen. You know, I've normally got some sort of recording pen or recording glasses, so I can get that information off their screen as well. And sometimes I'll say, can you just step to the side while I do something? Perfect opportunity to plug in a bad USB or something like that. And at that point, actually, security were aware of my presence at that point, and apparently they were chasing me down. I walked 3rd floor, 2nd floor, 1st floor, and exited the same way I got in without being caught. So it shows that the security weren't really looking at that CTV following me. They kind of are very reactive. So they're looking back to say, somebody got in. They're looking back to see where I'd been. So they didn't, I wasn't running either. I was just literally walking around talking to people. So it just shows CCTV isn't as scary as you think. If I'm on CCTV thinking, it's not a problem because they're not going to look at it live. So once we're in, what do we do? So we want to access high restricted areas such as server rooms, filing cabinets, offices, control rooms. Yet again, this is something that the client would define in terms of a risk. So server rooms are one of my favorites because nobody likes you in their server room. So I try to get there. I love to remove stock and items and branded stuff. So, I'll look for example, the fire marshal that's got a fire marshal high vis on the back of their desk. I might take that with me. Or if somebody left their access control card on their desk, I'll have that. I'll have anything that I can find like that. If one engagement was to actually take stock out of the warehouse, I love taking things with me. I'll look for unlocked machines. I'll find an unlocked machine. If there's nobody around it, I might stick a bad USB. A bad USB basically runs a script simulating as a keyboard. So it doesn't get flagged up as like a mass storage device. And then that will contact back to a C2 connection that we've got set up. I'll look for email addresses, look for email accounts that are open if a computer's unlocked. I'll look at messaging apps like Teams or Slack, and I'll try and send a message to the client contact to show that I've compromised that account. I'll look for meeting rooms with Ethernet jacks, where I can plug a remote access control device in. I tend to use a remote access control device, so something along the lines of a Raspberry Pi. This one's got a screen on it that helps me just run actions, but I'll also use a modem in it. So a USB modem that will plug into it. This basically means that if I can't get internet access from that device, I can directly communicate to it via SSH or some sort of VPN I've set up on it. So I can try and hack their network remotely without actually being on site. And I'll plant this under a desk, or in a little hatch underneath the floor where they've got the Ethernet jacks, or plant it in somewhere like the back of a computer or something. So yeah, again, you might want to do like keyloggers and stuff as well. But basically, once I've successfully got my goals, I'm out of there. I want to get out as quick as I can, because once I'm in and I've done my objectives, the longer I'm there, I'm going to get caught. Now, sometimes, depending on what type of engagement, if it's more of a social engagement rather than a red team engagement, I will try and up the paces. So I'll ask people to start using people's computers. Or just generally try and step it up until the point where I feel like I might get caught at this point. So that's what I'll try and do. Yeah, again, I'll look for fire exits. Fire exits are a great way to get out of a building if you need to. It will generally cause an alarm on the intruder alarm system on most sort of stairwells, so I try to avoid those if possible. There was, yet again, this bank that I used had one of these. You had to swipe out or one of these to get out. I just used that. When I got out of the building without being compromised. But yeah, once you're in, it's obviously remember you need to get out as well. So what sort of mitigations can we learn from all this information? So first of all, don't disclose information over the phone or social media. One company where I tried to do, the fire officer basically said to me, I'm sorry, we're not allowed to give out any information over the phone. You need to contact someone you're aware of, which I thought was great. I thought, I'm stumped here. I don't know what to do because I can't get any more information out of them. So, information, even on social media, pictures of lanyards and stuff like that, very easy copy. Even if it's blurred, I don't even need to know your name. Just the layout sometimes is believable. Another engagement where I use that technique. So, for example, this engagement, I saw a lanyard. I made a copy of that lanyard. They had custom lanyards with their company name on it. I created a custom lanyard. I created a custom badge, trying to use it as much as I can. I actually took a screenshot of the lanyard and overlaid my parts to try and work out exact placements of everything. I then got that printed. And when I used that in the engagement, I used tailgating to get in initially. And because it was a very small site, there was probably 5 or 10 people on this site. They said, "Oh, your access control won't be on this system here because you're from a different office," because that was our pretext. He says, "Do you want me to add your access control onto our system?" And do you know what I said? Yes. So I give them my card, and he's holding my fake lanyard and card that I created. I ordered it from this website, and it's a card I just found. I didn't know the technology of the card, so I just picked something. And he's there. He's first of all trying to search me, and he goes, "Oh, I can't find you on our system." I said, "Oh yeah, we had some problem with these cards back in our office." And he goes, "Oh, I'll just add it manually then." So he's trying to add it onto the access control system. The only failure at this point was that I chose the wrong card technology. At this point, I was a bit sad because I thought if I had the right card technology, he would have programmed our cards with me and another consultant onto their access control system, and we would have had legitimate access to this site for the simple fact that we copied their lanyard. That was it. So something as simple as that can be very worrying and very scary. And when we told the client, they were very scared at that point, thinking, wow, that was, it's something as simple as that. Because ID card printers, they're actually, they're not cheap. I mean, you can get one for about £700 onwards, but once you've got it, you can use it. If you're an APT or someone who has all the money in the world or all the resources, then you're not going to think twice about doing that. So think about it. You can use that quite easily. So install isolation key switches. So obviously coming from the fire alarm background, the access control, you can install what they call an isolation key switch on the fire alarm panel. So when you're doing your weekly test, you can turn this key switch, and that makes sure that none of the doors release as you're doing the fire alarm test. The sounders will still work. People are still aware of how it sounds. And that complies. However, to fully comply, you need to test it at least once a year to make sure it does actually release the doors. So obviously at them points, you make sure that there is, extra monitoring for things like server rooms and people coming in the building. Maybe you prevent people from signing in or swiping in at that point, to make sure that no people are coming into the building that are not meant to be there. Make sure your access control is fit for purpose. There's no point of having these green break glasses installed on the ingress side of a secure area, because you've basically just installed a big key to get in. So make sure they're installed properly. Make sure the door controllers and interfacing is all on the secure side of the building. So, someone with a ladder, maybe they've got in legitimately, or illegitimately with a ladder, they won't be able to access the access control systems to release the door. And obviously staff training, make sure that people are trained about how to challenge unknown people. If they don't recognize them, what would you do? Challenge them, take them to reception, verify. Don't just look at their ID card. It could be fake. One of the things I always say with access control, why don't you ask them to swipe it and make sure it does actually work? That's a good way to verify that their access control card works. It might be a clone. Yes, you've got that worry. If you're still not sure, take them to reception. Make sure they're signed in correctly. And yet again, door forced alarm, make sure these are actually connected to the intruder alarm system. So if somebody does open a door without swiping in, for example, that server room situation, if it went to security rather than just logged on the access control log, then maybe people would have been aware and they would have investigated it rather than me go to every single server room in that building. And that is everything. I hope you gained some information about this. I know it was long, and I showed you some cool stuff. But if anybody wants one of these keys, I did buy some, so you can have them as a little memoir and to not be used maliciously. But yeah, any questions about that? Yeah, sure. So on one engagement, it was a slightly skew-iffed engagement because we gained access to this plant. In fact, this engagement was to access the control room for the ICS system, so the actual plant producing the manufacturing the product. We got into that plant within half an hour of the engagement, and we got out. We shouldn't have been in that server. Apparently, it was the only time it was opened at that point. We then had legitimate access for the rest. So, for example, security were aware we were there, but nobody else was, and we had this whole week there of nobody reporting us. Other engagements, it was another financial firm. We gained access. We stayed there for 5 hours, sitting at a desk. People were making us tea and coffee. And then we ended the engagement because we were bored at that point, because we're there running Responder on their network, while sitting in their office. And then we basically got bored, so we wanted to see how many computers we could access, so we asked people to use their computers, and then we left at that point. We didn't get compromised. So yeah, so probably you could easily stay, once you're in there, there's this full sense of security that you're meant to be there. The longer you're there, in fact, the more sense of security. So if you can pass the half an hour mark, the chances are nobody's going to come and approach you, because they've seen you there. They say, "Oh, that's the guy working on the PC, on the computers, on the internet." In fact, we went to one site and he was saying, "Oh, finally somebody coming to fix our network. That's great." And we're actually just running a responder in the network. It was great fun. Another one with the fire alarm system, I actually went as a pretend contractor. They actually gave me an all access pass as soon as I walked in the building, because I said I'm a contractor working on site. And then I wasn't actually accessing the whole building. It was just a client floor, but I used that to get access to the client's floor. And I used that yet again as almost like a pretext to show that I'm meant to be there, because they saw that I had an all access pass from security. So yeah, you could, once you're in it pretty much. It's all about having those minor details to make you more believable. I think we've got time for one more question. Yes. There are some human hacking qualifications that you can do. I'm not entirely sure if there are many. It's pretty much experience thing. So, I got into it without knowing anything pretty much, and learned that way, and used my past experience of doing fire alarms in order to get in. So you really have to look around, but there are some courses that are concentrating on the sort of the human social engineering elements of it. So that might be good route to look at. And like acting classes, you got to pretend to be someone. So it's always good to look at that. I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, guys.